Hello, this is Karl-James Langford. This is the Archaeology of Archaeology online part 6, and this is Pompeii. To have a series looking at the archaeology of archaeology and how archaeology developed, you couldn't do this without looking at the likes of Pompeii. Pompeii itself was one of those discoveries, some say deliberate, accidental, made in 1748. Was then used as a treasure house to make the kings and queens of Naples extremely rich. It was only really until about 1860, 1863 that Ferrelli, the archaeologist, decided to look at the likes of Pompeii in a very highly scientific way, and that's when we see the first casts of the figures being made. Pompeii itself in the Campania plain is dominated, as we've already said, by Naples, the Bay of Naples. So we've already got a bit of fame there with the established medieval genre. And so when Pompeii was actually discovered, the events of the 24th of August, AD 79, and we can say, I always joke in my classes, approximately 12:01. Roughly about 12 o'clock, the lives of the Pompeians, some say up to 15,000, some give a mean estimate of about 11,000, were sort of laid to rest. The cast, as we can see in front of us, with the idea of Ferrelli. This is Murray, the archaeologist who is famed in 1944, I think it is, for trying to defend Pompeii by himself against the ensuing onslaught of the Americans, who did a little bit of damage to Pompeii when they sort of captured it after the Germans had vacated it. The idea of creating casts of individual lives that were made extinct by the huge blast of Pompeii that day. Some, I would argue, is that the figures that are to be seen preserved in plaster of Paris against the human dignity of the individuals that have seen their lives dramatically erased. Seeing somebody's pain in a figure like this, or a dog, or a dog's pain in a plaster of Paris cast, I feel isn't right. But then again, many archaeologists would argue it's useful to see what was happening in these people's last moments, and it's unique. So coming back from what I've just said, these demonstrations of people in their last moments should be taken with some great deal of respect. Anyway, moving on, that's archaeology being preserved in the moment using plaster of Paris by Ferrelli, starting in 1863. Pompeii itself is a very great city in the sense that it's an example of many of the cities that would have existed across the Roman world. It was at its height in AD 79. It was a Roman city that demonstrates the very best and worst of Rome. One thing that can be demonstrated at Pompeii is that there's a very personal and sexualized nature with it. You've got indications of brothels. You've also got indications of everyday normal lives. This is an illustration of a building that was excavated in Pompeii that basically had, all the fixtures and fittings in place at the moment that the eventual building's roof collapsed, with the 4 to 6 meters of weight of volcanic ash and pumice. And we're told as well, the excavated evidence tells us of some loaves of bread being found as well. Pompeii, to me, is a positive and a negative area of archaeology in the way that we see it being excavated. In the early stages of Pompeii, it was just being dug into for its goodies, for the gold and silver that it contained, and the bronze making bronze medallions for the kings and queens of Naples. This really all seemingly started to stop in the 1860s, but it hasn't stopped looting to continue to this very day. I've heard of people going to Pompeii today, picking up bits of tessera from the floor. You can even see bits of Roman frescoes in people's houses when they've come home from holidaying in Pompeii even today. And I feel that the destruction being caused to Pompeii, as you can see in this illustration, naturally isn't on. The site itself should be really just recovered up. Public access stopped because the adequate respect that this site deserves isn't given, and the freak show that people see isn't acceptable either. Archaeologists can be seen as being very respectful when they've excavated the site, but then when it's left to deteriorate in this way is quite heinous. Now we see the likes of Rome itself from this illustration. Yeah, that's cherished and preserved, but Pompeii seemingly isn't. This is an illustration of the Bay of Pompeii as it's being hit. This isn't at night, this is 11, 12 o'clock in the day when there's a big ash cloud blocking out the sun. And it's seen that Maecenas, Pliny the Elder, heads out and his body is found on the beach of at Strabo a couple of days later. People go out in ships to try and save the peoples of Pompeii, but the ships get laden down with pumice and ash, and the people overcome with the gas clouds. These are some of those unfortunate victims that are overtaken by the gas clouds. Children, parents, lovers, centurions, statesmen, common vulgaris, everything alike. This illustration, I've got a similar illustration of this on my wall. This is how it looked in the I think 1880s, 1890s, but it's in a deplorable state that lots of this is actually becoming overgrown. So what's the archaeology of archaeology here? The archaeology of archaeology here is excavating, displaying and conserving, but then excavating, photographing, and then seeing what's left after it's just been left out in the open and wantonly destroyed by tourists. This is one of those illustrations from the 1700s where the streets are in their prime when they're being found in the 1700s. Nothing like this is really on display anymore. There are occasional storms, and there are occasional floods, and lots of buildings collapse. We've got examples recently, and again the archaeology should be covered back up. But archaeological excavation is unfortunately still being undertaken at Pompeii. This is one of the better areas of Pompeii on display, and the museums themselves display in glass cabinets these human lives, which takes away from what the site is about. The whole storage room is full of artifacts such as this. And it seems that archaeology is being undertaken at Pompeii for the sake of it. The likes of the great treasure troves being found at Pompeii are no longer there, but a cache of copper coins. Somebody tried to escape with a cache of copper coins. They never ever did, but the person actually escaping with a cache of copper coins would have been buried alongside this, but the body's been taken elsewhere, the copper coins put on display. Vis-a-vis whoever owned them, we don't know now because they've been disconnected, and that's a great shame because we could have connected that cast body with these coins, understand the person, the status, a little bit about their lives, maybe somewhere along the line from the excavated evidence getting the person's name, but that's all been lost because lots of the archaeology has been done shoddily at Pompeii. The amphitheatre at Pompeii, something that you'd see in any normal Roman town or city throughout the Roman Empire. We haven't alas found anybody sitting on the toilet, but then again the preservation of archaeology in parts is still very great. This building here is that building that I mentioned earlier on, the bakers, and you can just imagine in that moment these people are actually still grinding the corn, turning it around, and and suddenly hearing the palaver and the skies darkening, the loaves of bread, their panic. I feel that this display of the human remains is absolutely disgusting. Again, the sadness of the person at Pompeii in AD 79, and the sadness that I feel as an archaeologist. Again, all these human remains being displayed in this way, I think is wrong. This should be covered up, not displayed in this way. Human skeletal remains. What they basically did, there was voids in the ground, and they would simply pour plaster of Paris into the voids in the ground, and then they would excavate the plaster of Paris in the ground with their artifacts. Now they're actually using some kind of something very similar to Perspex, so you can actually look through it and you can actually see all the artifacts and stuff. One of the streets at Pompeii. More of these bodies. The excavated areas at Pompeii, as you can see, all the pits and streets there. You can see the amphitheatre and all the buildings and so on. But the areas up in the north-east segment haven't been excavated, and there are other zones as well that haven't been excavated. I feel that should remain until this archaeologist can respectively get the funding to backfill lots of the archaeology at Pompeii and protect it, or display it in such a way, i.e. a cover over the site, that would give it more justice. This is Pompeii, a little model there that tourists can actually see. This is actually some of that Perspex type gel they're actually using, so you can actually see more of the body and the ribs and so on. But then again, this should be covered up and treated respectfully. The last moments of the person's lives, you wouldn't wish to feel our relatives are displayed like this. And ending on Pompeii today, an example of archaeology and archaeology. This is Karl-James Langford from my video log recorded on the 30th of July 2016. Thank you.